بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر صدق الله مولانا العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد النبي الأمي الحبيب العالي القدر العظيم الجاه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله. Alhamdulillah, today we are discussing the rules in relation to Salah. In the previous discussions, we had a small discussion in relation to wudu and ghusl. And those are some of the preconditions of Salah, and inshallah we will be discussing what the conditions are for Salah to be valid, for Salah to be correct. But first of all, we will commence with the method of Salah. The importance of Salah is understood by every Muslim. It is an obligation, it is fard upon us to perform the 5 daily Salahs. And inshallah, when we're discussing the rules about Salah, we'll understand how important Salah is, to the extent that even in the state of illness, a person still has to perform Salah. But there will be situations in which the ill person's Salah will change compared to a healthy person's Salah. He'll be forgiven from performing Salah in certain ways, and he'll be forgiven from certain, or she will be forgiven from certain obligations that are necessary upon a person who's healthy. But first of all, we'll mention the method of performing Salah. And this method, just like we did with wudu and ghusl, this method has in it all the necessary elements, as well as the sunnah ways as well, and the mustahab ways too. And then inshallah we will break down the Salah in terms of which parts of Salah are absolutely necessary. And before that, before even starting Salah, what is important to make sure that we have these conditions before we enter Salah, because without those conditions, Salah will not be valid. So the method of Salah is that we stand facing towards the Qibla whilst in the state of wudu. And when we stood as followers of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, our feet are to be apart only by 4 fingers, by a distance of 4 fingers between the feet. Now, while stood in this way, after making intention, we should raise our hands to our earlobes, making the thumbs touch the earlobes. And the fingers, when raising the hands, should not be completely tight, and nor should they be completely wide apart, but rather they should be in their state. And the fingers should be facing towards the Qibla when we are saying Allahu Akbar. Now, while saying Allahu Akbar, we should lower our hands. We should be looking towards the place where we perform sajda, meaning where we will go down to prostrate the sajda. That's where our eyes should be. At the time of raising the hands, we should have the intention within our heart. And if we want, it is also good that before starting the salah, before saying Allahu Akbar, we utter the words, we say the words of intention, so, to remind ourselves of what we are performing. In terms of the method of folding the hands, inshallah, we'll mention the method for the males first, and then inshallah for the females, we'll mention some things. Even the raising of the hands for the females is different. So the males fold their hands in such a way that the small finger of the right hand and the thumb, you make a circle with them around the wrist. And the three fingers, apart from the little finger and the thumb, the three fingers of the right hand should be placed on top of the left arm as you're making a circle around the wrist with the thumb and the small finger. And when you've done that, you place the hands below the navel, below the belly button. So either on top of the belly button or below, but the best is for it to be below. But if a person suffers from lack of concentration, then they can put their hands on their belly button, but otherwise below the belly button. But it should not be above. As followers of the Hanafi school, our hands will be folded below the navel. Now, the first thing we recite is called Thana, Subhanak Allahumma, which is also called Istiftah. So with this dua, we start the salah. Up to Wala ilaha ghayruk, and then you have Ta'awudh and the Tasmiyah. And after the Ta'awudh and the Tasmiyah, meaning A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you have the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha. And at the end of Surah Al-Fatiha, we recite Ameen, and then a surah from the Holy Quran, or 3 short verses, 3 short ayat from the Holy Quran, or 1 long ayah that is equivalent to the 3 short ayahs is recited after that. Now that has to be recited along with Surah Fatiha in every single rak'ah of Salah. So whichever rak'ah of Salah you're reading, you will always read along with Surah Al-Fatiha a surah, or you'll read 3 short ayat which have within them at least, in order for, when you have 3 short ayat, you have the 30 letters within there automatically, or 1 long ayah that has at least 30 letters, Arabic huruf within it. Now, this is in every single rak'ah you have to do this, apart from the 3rd or 4th rak'ah, 3rd and 4th, if you're reading, for example, Zuhr and Isha and Asr, the fard rak'ats, or the 3rd rak'ah in Maghrib. In those last rak'ats, it is not necessary to read a surah, or to read an ayah, or to read 3 short ayat after Surah Al-Fatiha. So generally in every single rak'ah you will be reading a surah along with Surah Al-Fatiha, or a few verses along with Surah Al-Fatiha, or 1 long verse that's equivalent to 3 short verses along with Surah Al-Fatiha. That's in every single rak'ah regardless of the salah, apart from the fard rak'ats. In the fard rak'ats, after you've done the first 2, whatever you perform after that, whether it be the 3rd or whether it be the 4th, in those 3rd and 4th, you will only recite Surah Al-Fatiha. You do not have to recite a surah along with it, and the sunnah way is actually for you not to recite a surah after Surah Al-Fatiha in those last rakats. The famous surah is recited by people, Surah Al-Ikhlas. Now, in many places, the children are taught Surah Al-Fatiha and then they're taught Surah Al-Ikhlas. And they think, so Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad. That surah. And many of them think that this is to be recited in every single rak'ah, and the best way is this. If you did read Surah Al-Ikhlas in every single rak'ah, your salah would be valid, but it's best for you to read different surahs in each rak'ah. So it's good for you to learn more than one surah. But as children are small, they are generally taught one surah first, and that's Surah Al-Ikhlas. But along with that, then they should be taught other surahs of the Holy Quran. Now, when you finished reading the qira'ah after Surah Al-Fatiha, reading the verses, then you say Allahu Akbar and go into ruku. Now, in ruku, one should hold the knees firmly with both palms and keeping the fingers spread out around the knees. Right? And in ruku, the back should be straight. And the head and the back should all be level. And the legs should also be straight. Meaning the knees should not be bent when in ruku. When in ruku, we should be looking towards our feet. In ruku, you recite 3 times, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. It's important to be able to pronounce the letters, for example, of what we already discussed as well in relation to Surah Al-Fatiha and the surah along with it, that the letters that are within Surah Al-Fatiha should be pronounced correctly. And that's why it is fardul ayn, is fard upon every single individual to know at least that of tajweed, that they are able to differentiate between letters. So you're able to differentiate between the throat letters, for example. So between ha and ha, for example. So you're not saying alhamdu ma'adallah and you say alhamdu with the ha. So in the same way, in ruku', when reciting Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, it's important for you to be able to pronounce the Azim correctly. And if you're struggling with the dha, you're still learning how to pronounce letters properly, and you're going to mispronounce the dha in Azim, and because when you mispronounce it, the meaning will change, it's best for you to then recite Subhana Rabbiyal Kareem. So those who struggle with tajweed should recite Subhana Rabbiyal Kareem in the ruku if they're struggling to correctly pronounce Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. Then after that, saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, you should rise to the position which is called Qawma. So after ruku, you stand up and Sami Allahu liman hamida, Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Now this, inshallah, we're going to be breaking down what is necessary and what is not necessary within Salah. And when we say what is not necessary, it doesn't mean you just leave it. The reason why we're learning what is not necessary is that if you made a mistake, you would know that was your mistake a major mistake, that means you have to repeat the Salah, or was the mistake such that it was so major that your Salah is completely invalid, or was your mistake such that although it was not good to make this mistake, but your Salah was not affected. Now, unfortunately, many people do not stand up straight for Sami Allahu liman hamida position, which is called Qawma. And the reason why they don't stand up straight is often because they're in a rush. So they don't do this when they're behind the Imam. It's usually when they're alone, right? So from the ruku position, they just pick up the head a bit and then straight down into sajda. This is wrong. This goes against, this action is wajib to stand up straight. So therefore their salah is incomplete if they don't stand up straight for Sami Allahu liman hamida, right? For at least to stand up straight is wajib. And what is the difference between fard and wajib? Inshallah, we will discuss that when we're breaking down the different parts of salah. So then after you've recited Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd, recite Allahu Akbar and go down into sajda. Now when going down into sajda, the best way to go down for sajda is that you have your hands on your knees, and the first thing to go down to the ground is your knees. So the first thing on the ground is your knees, and then you put your hands out. So then your hands go onto the ground, and then your nose, and then your forehead. So that's how you go down into sajda. Now your forehead should properly rest on the ground, as well as your nose. And when you're in the sajda, your sight should be upon your you should be looking towards your nose. When in sajda, you should keep your arms, and this is for the males, right? So inshallah, like I said earlier, what the differences are for the females, inshallah, we'll mention later, because if I mention them now, it may get a bit confusing. So for the males, you keep your arms separate from the stomach, right? And you keep your arms separate from the sides of your body and of your chest, and in the same way, you keep your stomach separate from the thighs, and the thighs separate from the shins. So you should be spread out when in sajda, and this is especially when you're alone, to the extent that if a small animal was able to go under, the small animal would be able to go under you when you are in sajda. But if you're in jama'ah, if you're in congregation, then don't be elbowing the brother next to you. In that situation, you will be allowed to keep your arms a bit closer to your sides when you're in gatherings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove this calamity that we have at the moment, and may we all be gathered again in jama'ah, in congregation, and then inshallah we can act upon this. In our houses, when we're performing salah with jama'ah, then these things are also things that we can consider. When in sajda, the feet should be folded in such a way that the tips of all 10 toes are facing towards the qibla, right? So they're facing towards the holy Kaaba. The palms should be flat on the ground, and the fingers facing towards the qibla when in sajda. And the tip of the fingers should be level to the ears, right? So where do you keep your hands is also an important aspect to understand, in order to understand how to perform the sajda in accordance to the sunnah. In sajda, you recite Subhana Rabbiyal A'la 3 times. Again, taking into consideration taking into account of the letters. So whatever you recite them properly. And hence, along these sessions of salah, the session in relation to tajweed is also an important one for us all to concentrate on. Because without tajweed, our salah will not be correct, it will not be valid. And as a matter of fact, if we're making mistakes, we'll be in causing issues with our salah, especially if we are changing the meanings by mispronouncing letters. So inshallah, when you refer to the tajweed sessions, you will understand the importance of tajweed and how that comes hand in hand with the importance of your salah and the validity of your salah. In many of our classes, when we're teaching the fiqh of salah, it then becomes clear that the students need assistance and need help with tajweed. And so therefore, I would encourage the brothers and sisters to concentrate on their tajweed, because that's also an important part of getting your salah correct. Now, when you're rising from the sajda, it will be the opposite to the thing that came down first will be the last to leave. So when you came down, you put your knees down first, then you put your hands, then you put your nose, and then you put your forehead. When you're rising, you raise your forehead first, then the nose, then the hands, and if you're then standing up, then it will be the knees. But between the two sajdas is another action that is wajib and is obligatory. And inshallah, like I said, we will be breaking down what is obligatory and what's not. And that is the sitting down in between the two sajdas. Again, just like we described with the qawma, where we recite Sami Allahu liman hamida, people don't stand up straight. In the same way, some people do not sit down for jalsa. Instead, they raise their head a bit and then go back down, right? And it's important that we sit down in that position for the time that it can take for a person to say Subhanallah once, right? So when you rise from the sajda, you sit down for the time that at least Subhanallah can be uttered once. And it's best to read a dua in this position. And if you don't know the longer dua mentioned within the books, then just Allahumma ghfirli, right? So you say Allahumma ghfirli and then go down. By practicing saying a dua in the sitting position in between the two sajdas, which is called jalsa, you will find that you are automatically doing this thing calmly. Because unfortunately, many people rush through this action. Now, after you perform the second sajda, and it's necessary to perform two sajdas in every rak'ah, raise the head. You rise up according to how we described, right? That you rise up opposite to. And now when you're rising, the best way is for you to not be leaning against anything whilst rising. So you should not be putting your hand down on the ground, for example, when rising. But if you absolutely need to, then that is fine. Because, for example, if somebody's weak or they're ill and they have to put their hand against something to stand up, then they're forgiven, right? They are excused. But if you're healthy, then you should not lean against something. Do not put your hand down. As a matter of fact, put your hands on your knees and get up. And this will, inshallah, be good for your spiritual and physical health, inshallah. In the second rak'ah, it's good to start at the beginning by reciting Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and then reciting Surah Al-Fatiha and another surah in the second rak'ah. And then your two rak'ahs are finished. If you have a third rak'ah, then after you've done the two sajdas of the second rak'ah, you will sit down and recite At-Tahiyyat to Abduhu wa Rasuluh. And after Abduhu wa Rasuluh, you will stand up for the third. But if the salah is only consisting of two rak'ats, then you will continue after Abduhu wa Rasuluh with Durood Sharif, with salawat and the last dua. Now, in some situations, there's some discussions about when it's necessary to not go beyond Abduhu wa Rasuluh. Inshallah, that will be discussed in its place. So this is basically the method of salah. Then after you've finished the dua, the famous dua is Allahumma rabbi ja'alni muqim as-salati. In the same way, Allahumma rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. And in the same way, Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi dhulman kathira. So then to finish the salah, you first turn your face towards the right shoulder, saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And then towards the left shoulder, saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And then your salah is complete. So before we go on to breaking down the salah into what is necessary, what is absolutely fard, and the preconditions of salah, there's some things for the sisters in terms of how their method is a bit different to the brothers. When they raise their hands for Takbir al-Tahrima, for the first Allahu Akbar, the sisters will not be raising their hands all the way to the earlobes, but rather they will be raising their hands to their shoulders. Their hands should remain covered under their shawl when raising their hands under their shawl or under their hijab. And in qiyam, when they stood, their way of folding their hands is that they place their left palm on the chest and put the right palm on top of the left palm. When going to ruku, we had with the brothers about the straight back and the straight legs. With the sisters, it's just that they slightly bend down into ruku, enough that they're placing their hands on their knees. They don't have to straighten their back and straighten their legs. And they should not grasp onto their knees like we described with the brothers. Then after that, the sisters do still have to stand up straight for Sami Allahu liman hamida, and this will also be an error amongst the sisters, just like it is amongst the brothers, that many don't stand up for Sami Allahu liman hamida straight. Instead, they just slightly rise and then go down. When the sisters perform sajda, they do not spread out the body like it was described for the males, but rather, in accordance to the madhab, in accordance to the teachings of our imam and the works of our scholars of the Hanafi madhab, the sisters will have the body parts close together. So the sajda will be done in a way that their arms are touching the sides and their stomachs are attached to their thighs and the thighs to their shins. They are close together in performing the sajda. The body is crunched together. It's not spread out like the males. When sat down, this was a point that was actually left for the males as well, that when the males are sat down for at-tahiyyat, for the qa'dah, when they sat down, the males should have their right foot raised with the 5 toes of the right foot facing towards the qibla, and the left foot should be spread out under their body towards their right. But the sisters, they will have both their feet towards their right side, and they should be sat in such a way that their feet are spread out towards the right. Obviously, the practical methods of this would be a lot more helpful, and inshallah, by attending the classes physically, once things have improved, you'll manage to practically perform your salah and understand how to perform salah. Because people make errors, individual errors in salah, just like with tajweed as well. Some people think having an app or listening to a video session for tajweed is enough, but it's often not enough, because an individual will be making a mistake that he can't catch himself or she can't catch herself, and that error can only be picked up by reciting to somebody else. In the same way, in the performance of salah, people will make individual errors that can only be caught out if they physically practice in front of somebody else. So if you are living in a house where there's somebody who understands the method of performing salah correctly, then you should consult them, right? You should show them that you're performing salah in this way, and is this correct? You should not be ashamed to learn the deen, right? So regardless of your age, it might even be that parents who don't understand how to perform salah correctly, because it's been so many years since they studied in madrasa, and their child is learning in madrasa, and their child has recently learned how to perform salah correctly, and it might be that the parent has to consult the child, but they should not be ashamed in doing that, because this is a way of learning the deen, and in learning the deen, we do not feel ashamed of learning from others, regardless, even if they are younger than us, right? And this is a very important aspect of our deen, right? It's our salah. As-salatu imadud deen. Salah is the pillar of the deen. Man aqamaha faqad aqama ad-deen. Whoever established the salah has established the deen. وَمَنْ هَدَمَهَا فَقَدْ هَدَمَ الدِّينَ. Whoever did not establish it, whoever destroyed it, they destroyed their deen. Now, in terms of this aspect, that salah is the pillar of the deen, فَمَنْ أَقَامَهَا. In the Holy Quran, you'll find أَقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ, establish salah. So the Holy Quran doesn't just say sallu, it doesn't just say pray, but rather it says aqimu as-salah, performs, establish salah. Now the establishment of salah means that you perform the salah in the correct manner, right? That you take into account all the outer and inner rules needed for performance of salah. So what do you outwardly need to do correctly, and what do you inwardly need to spiritually, what should your state be when you're performing salah? All of these things should be understood. So now we'll move on to the breaking down of important aspects of salah. Before even starting the salah, there are 6 things that you have to have ensured that you fulfill. Right? So 6 conditions. It's a bit like if you're applying for something, there's conditions for your job application, right? If one of those conditions is missing, you cannot get that job. In the same way, in relation to salah, there are 6 conditions. If any one of these conditions is missing, the salah is invalid, right? So the first one is tahara, is purity. Now purity can be subdivided into groups. That you have purity of the body, right? Purity of the clothes, purity of the place that you're performing salah on, that all of these things are pure, there's nothing impure on them. And in the same way, you have purity in terms of your spiritual state, that you are free from anything that would make your wudu invalid. You have done wudu, and in the same way, prior to wudu, you have done your ghusl, right? So there's no impurity that's there. So we call that impurity hadath. So when you need to do wudu, it's called hadath. And in the same way, when you need to do ghusl, it's called hadath. One's al-hadath al-akbar, and one is al-hadath al-asghar. So al-hadath al-akbar, the bigger state of impurity, is when you need to do ghusl, and al-hadath al-asghar is when you need to do wudu. So you're free from the hadath, and on the other hand, you're also free from najasa. You're free from physical impurity. So you don't have anything on your clothes that's impure. Where you're performing salah, there's nothing that's impure on the place. And in the same way, your body is also free from having anything on it that is impure. So that's the first condition. And these 6 conditions should be known by all of us off by heart. So if we're asked, we should immediately be able to tell that these are the 6 conditions of salah. So the first is tahara. And the second is sitrul awra, to hide the body parts that have to be hidden. This was discussed last week when talking about ghusl, and therefore we should know what the sitrul awra is, what the awra is, what the part of the body is that has to be hidden. But of course, is وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and remind for reminding benefits the believers. And also there'll be many people in today's session who were not present in the session about ghusl, but those who were present in the session about ghusl, or have have gone over the session about ghusl, they should be able to tell what the part of the body is that the males have to hide, and what the part of the body is that the females have to hide. They should be able to tell that. So it's important that when we're learning, we are making notes, that we are remembering. So this is not just information that's to be absorbed. It's actually information that needs to be fully consumed, right, and fully remembered. And these are important things that you have to know. So what's fard is fard for us to know, and what's wajib is wajib for us to know. What's sunnah is sunnah for us to know. So these aspects are fard for us to know, because without them, our salah will not be valid. So for the men, it's from the belly button, from the navel to the knees, including the knees. Right? So below the belly button to the knees and including the knees must be covered. Now this is from the front and the back. Now many of our brothers will be wearing t-shirts or other clothing, and when they go into sajda, the t-shirt slightly rises. Now it may not be that their private area is showing, but if the area below the navel is being shown from behind, then the salah is becoming invalid by that. It's the condition of salah is missing. So they should be careful in relation to this and make sure that they're wearing clothing that covers the body. And that's why it is a good practice in some parts of the world where they actually have a type of jubba, a bit like the certain types of jubbas that you find in Turkey and Syria, and they have those jubbas in the masajid. In our masajid, we do usually have baskets where they place hats. So if somebody comes in without a hat, then he puts on the hat. But this is even more important than the hat, that our body parts be covered when performing salah. So they have jubbas on the rails, that when somebody comes in, for example, in clothing, then they feel that if they go into sajda, the body part will become uncovered. They can put that jubba on and perform salah in it, and then they will find that their body parts are covered. And that's why it's good to perform salah in the more traditional Islamic clothing, because when you perform salah in the more traditional Islamic clothing, you will find that this condition of sitrul awra is a lot easily fulfilled. That you're covering the awra more easily than in Western clothes. It is still possible in Western clothes, but you have to take care. And unfortunately, many of our brothers either don't take care or they don't realize that this is a situation that when they're going into sujood or when they're going into ruku, their awra is being opened up. The women, for them, the awra is the entire body except for the face and except for both their hands, the palms, and the feet. So the hands up to the wrist of the females and feet up to the ankles, if they are left uncovered, the salah will still be valid, but the rest of the body has to be covered. From the wrists onwards, the arms also have to be covered as well. And that's something that the sisters many times don't take care of, and their wrists are often exposed. It's similar with when performing tawaf, for example, that many women will find that their arms are opening up, and that's their awra opening up during that time, which should not be occurring. So it's one thing that your body part should not be completely uncovered, and it's another thing that the body part should not be exposed either. So it shouldn't be that somebody can see it even though you're wearing clothing. One of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that people will be wearing clothing but still be not wearing clothing. So wearing such thin clothing that the body part which has to be covered in salah is still be exposed. Right? So for example, this actually exists more, this problem exists more with our elderly sisters, culturally that is, but otherwise it may be with the younger ones as well. But on the whole, on the majority of the instances, we found the elderly women falling over in this regard, that they're wearing such a shawl or such a cloth for hijab, which is very thin, so the hair can still be seen through that cloth, and they're performing salah. Now that, because the hair can still be seen, this condition of sitrul awra is not fulfilled, and the salah is not valid for this reason. And in the same way, it might be that somebody is wearing, whether it's male or female, they're wearing such clothing that is thin and their body parts are being revealed. Now, some people have a habit of wearing clothing that's torn from here and there, and if that is torn to a large extent, showing the awra, the part that has to be hidden, then that situation will arise there again. So once again, it's about the way we dress, and that's why respectful dress code whilst performing salah is a good thing nevertheless. And we have to realize that we have dress codes for different. So if we're going to a job interview, we're going to have a certain way of dressing. If we're going to a wedding, we're going to have a certain way of dressing, right? If we're going to our friends, we will have a certain way of dressing. In the same way, when we are stood in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should also have that respect and that etiquette that this is, we will dress in a certain way that is showing that we are stood in the court of Allah, that we're humble in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so spiritually that will be respectful, and on the other hand, it will also save you from having your salah becoming invalid. So it's the same with the sisters, when we're talking about jubbas for the males, it's the same with the sisters as well. If, for example, they wear a jilbab or something similar to that, an abaya when performing salah, then that will save them from any issues with awra. Because in the more traditional, subcontinental clothing, for example, we have issues with the sisters as well, that the awra will not be concealed well if they're performing the salah in them. Wearing such thin clothes that any part of the awra is opened up to others, this is haram whether you're in salah or not. But the discussion that we're having here is in relation to the salah, right? The salah will become invalid. Wearing thick, tight clothing, so they're thick, but they're very tight. It does not expose the color of the body, but it reveals the shape of the sitar. This will not invalidate the salah. The salah will still be valid, but it will not be permissible for people to look at the body in this situation. That's why you should not be wearing such tight clothing that would cause this issue. And therefore it's prohibited for you to come out in front of people wearing such clothing. Unfortunately, that what becomes fashion, we follow, and we don't consider whether what is fashionable is actually correct in accordance to our Sharia. We should always be dressed in a way that we can perform our salah. Alhamdulillah, generally in our community, we're seeing an improvement. In the past, there used to be a situation where if you're walking on the street and it's time for salah, and you said to your brother, let's go and perform salah, and he would say, my clothing is not right for salah. My clothes are not pure, for example. Right? So it's important to keep the purity of the clothes always. It reminds us of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he passed by two graves that were being punished, in which the people of the grave were being punished. And the Prophet ﷺ said, these two people are being punished for things that they could have easily avoided. Right? So the first person was being punished for not saving himself from the effects of urine, meaning he was not purifying his body and not keeping his clothes pure. And the second was a person who would tell tales. He would spread news from one place to another to cause argumentation, which is called namima. So it's important to have purity of the clothes, and it's also important to have the clothing in such a way that our body parts are properly covered. Facing the Qibla is the third condition. So far we've discussed two conditions. So if you don't already know the 6 conditions of Baha, you need to make note of the first, which is Tahara, purity. Right? If you don't know the Arabic, just knowing purity. And secondly, covering the body parts that have to be covered. And in Arabic that's called Sitrul Awra. And the third condition is Istiqbalul Qibla, facing the Kaaba. Right? And so if you are performing salah and deliberately your chest moves away from the Kaaba without a valid reason, the salah will become invalid. Right? And even if you do that deliberately without any valid reason, even if you do it for a moment, your salah will become invalid. So you have to have your chest towards the Kaaba. If it's done by error, then that's a different situation, right? As long as he comes back within the time that one could say Subhanallah 3 times, if he comes back to facing towards the Qibla, the salah will be valid. The face should also be towards the Qibla, right? But the more emphasis is on the chest. If the chest is turned away, then the salah will become invalid. In terms of the face, it's severely disliked, makruh tahrimi, to have your face away from the Qibla. Now, in terms of the direction of the Qibla, you have a 45 degrees leeway, meaning as long as you are within 45 degrees of the direction of the Qibla, your salah is valid. Because managing to be exact, right, precise with your musalla when you're facing it towards the Qibla is often challenging for people, right? That you can't get it directly, exactly there. But alhamdulillah, people will try, and as long as you try, that's the main thing. So if you find out after salah that you're a bit towards the right or a bit towards the left, as long as you're within 45 degrees, right, then you're okay. In terms of if you don't know where the Qibla is, you go to a place and you don't know where the Qibla is. Now, with modern gadgets, people are able to find the Qibla more easily using them. Unfortunately, if you're like me and struggle with modern gadgets, then it does become a problem. So I even had this situation recently when at an airport beyond the area where the prayer room was present. So we were more towards the gate, and the time of salah came, and if we didn't perform salah now, then we'd have to perform it on the plane, which would be difficult. So it was more wise to perform the salah immediately there. But unfortunately, it was difficult to find the Qibla, and even though I had an app, I was struggling to use it. So I did act upon what are the conditions, and that's why I'm giving this example. That when you don't know where the Qibla is and there's another Muslim present, you should ask them. So I did ask around, but unfortunately people are negligent and were not concentrating. So I had to do tahari in the end to decide where is the Qibla in my heart. So tahari means that you concentrate in your heart, where is the Qibla. So first you ask people around, and if they tell you, then that will be, then you perform salah towards that direction. There may be other signs around that show you where the Qibla is. If none of that is present, then where your heart says, that's where the Qibla is. So when you focus towards in your heart, where do I think the Qibla is? And if your heart says it's towards one way and you start the salah, then your heart changes, you can turn direction. So there's fiqhi riddles, meaning questions of in relation to fiqh that are there to intrigue people, to get them more interested, right? And one of those questions is that a person reads salah facing all 4 corners of a room and his salah is still valid. How would this be, right? And that is when he's in a place where he doesn't know where the Qibla is. So he's facing towards the east, for example, in the eastern side of the wall of the room, and then his heart says, no, it's the other way. So then he faces towards the western side, right? And then his heart says, no, it's the other way. Then he faces towards the northern side. Then his heart says, no, it's the other way. And he faces towards the southern side. Obviously, if he understood where north, east, and south and west is, and if he understood the directions, he probably would have a better chance of getting the Qibla correct. But I'm just giving that example of how if his heart during salah changed, his salah, what he's already performed is still fine. Now, if you perform salah doing tahari, So your heart was saying the Qibla is this way. Right? Now after Salah, you found out, no, when I was performing Salah, that was not the correct direction. The Qibla was actually the other way. The Salah is still valid. The Salah does not need to be repeated. It's important to do tahari. So if we don't know where the Qibla is, and there's 3 to 4 people amongst us, one person doing the tahari is not enough. Right? We would have to collectively do tahari, and as individuals think, where does my heart say the Qibla is? So you come along and you don't know where the Qibla is, and you see somebody else performing Salah, right? And the other person who's doing Salah is also doing it because of tahari. So say somebody of your group, he's done tahari and he's facing one way, and you just decide to follow him. You don't do what we're calling tahari, which means you don't concentrate on your heart. Where do I think the Qibla is? Then your Salah will not be valid, because you did not face the Qibla, and nor did you try to face the Qibla. So this was the third condition. So far we've done 3 conditions of Salah. The first is purity. The second is sitrul awra. And the third is istiqbalul qibla. Now what we always help the students understand this more easily, you think about it, when I'm going to perform Salah, what will I do before I'm going to perform Salah? So before I go to perform Salah, I will do wudu. So you realize the first condition is purity, right? So you'll make sure that then after purity, after you've done wudu, you're going to make sure you've got clothes on that are clean. But along with that, you have to make sure you've got clothes on that cover your body, right? And it may sound as though it's common knowledge, but unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, there's many people who don't realize that what they're wearing is not enough to cover their body, and therefore their Salah becomes invalid. And unfortunately, this is from time and time again, this situation occurs within our areas, and it becomes a bit of a challenge to explain, even though it's necessary for us to explain to those brothers that the Salah is invalid because of the fact that they're not covering their body in the correct manner. And the third is istiqbalul qibla, facing the qibla. So the fourth, so you think about it systematically, you put on clothes, you make sure that you put the clothes on that are covering your body and they're pure. Then you come to to perform Salah. So the first thing will be that you're going to put your musalla out if you're at home, and you're going to face the qibla, right? Or if you're in the masjid, you're going to face the qibla. So that's the third condition. Now, in terms of this and the next, sometimes I actually mention before mentioning facing the qibla, because you're going to think about the time first. Before you go on to the musalla, you're going to make sure that it's time for Salah, right? So right now it's time of Asr, and it's coming towards the end of the time of Asr, but you can't perform Fajr of tomorrow now, because that time has not arrived. You can't perform Maghrib now, or you can't perform Isha right now, because the time has not arrived. So you'll ensure that the correct time has come, and that's also a condition of Salah. So the fourth condition, which sometimes I describe as a third as well, right? So istiqbal al-qibla, I mentioned as a fourth, but it's fine mentioning mentioning time as a fourth as well. But it's just to help you learn the conditions of by heart more easily, that you think in your head, what steps will I take before I go to Salah? Because these are called the shara'it, the shart, or the conditions, the preconditions of Salah, right? So what would I do before I go to Salah? So the timing has to be within its time, the correct time. So we should ensure that our Salah is performed at the correct time using the calendars and the timetables of authentic ulama, right? The scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, who are experts in tawqeet, in sciences of timings. Not every scholar is an expert in the science of timings, and therefore it's important for us to refer to the timetables of those who are experts in this regard. And as followers of the school of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, it's important for us to be consulting ulama who are experts in the Hanafi madhab, so that our salah that we're performing, for example, Asr, is performed at the correct time, as well as other salawat. In terms of the time, so that's basically what people do, they follow the timetables, right? And so therefore I don't need to go into further details that we do actually go into during our more advanced classes, in terms of when does Fajr start, when does Dhuhr start, when does Asr start, right? When does Maghrib start, when does Isha start, and what are the differences of opinion in relation to Asr and Isha, for example, between our scholars of the Hanafi madhab, right? But for the public, that's basically it, that you follow what is a timetable prepared by experts, right, who are qualified in tawqeet. So all I will say in this regard on this platform is that it's important for you to be satisfied that they have expertise in the timings, in understanding salah timings, because a person may be an alim, he may be a mufti, but he may not be as expert in the science of timings. And Imam Ahmad Rida Khan rahimahullah ta'ala actually mentioned this within his fatwa as well, that finding people who are experts in timings is very difficult. He passed this on to his student Allama Zafruddin Bihari rahimahullah ta'ala in the subcontinent, and through Allama Zafruddin Bihari rahimahullah, this then spread on to his students, such as Khwaja Muzaffar Hussain rahimahullah ta'ala, who recently passed away, and then his students, and in Pakistan, Sayyid Afzal Hussain rahimahullah ta'ala. So the experts of the science of timings in Pakistan, for example, many of them are students of Hazrat Allama Bahrul Ulum Sayyid Afzal Hussain rahimahullah ta'ala. So those points are just to explain to you all that just being a scholar doesn't mean that a person is an expert in salah timings, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open up our hearts to consulting those ulama who are experts in this regard. In terms of, whilst we're talking about the timings of salah, we'll conclude with the discussion about the makruh times. So today we're going to manage to do we'll do all 6 conditions. I'll mention the last 2 and then I'll go into further detail about them in our next discussion, inshallah, before we move on to the fara'id of salah. So the 3 makruh times, the 3 times when salah is disliked to perform, any type of salah, right? Regardless of what type of salah it is disliked to perform it. They are based around the sun. So it's easy to remember these 3 times that are disliked: the sunrise and sunset. So those are the 2 at the end, one's in the middle. Sunrise and sunset, and in the middle you have midday. So these 3 times is disliked for a person to perform salah. There are some details, for example, after sunrise and 20 minutes after, you should not be performing any salah. And sunset, before sunset 20 minutes, you should not be performing any salah. However, if you have not read the Asr of today, and it's close to Maghrib time, it's makruh time, it's disliked for you to perform any salah, but because your fard is here that you haven't read, you have to read your Asr. But you should read your Asr in this situation in such a place where people don't get confused about what you're doing. Because unfortunately, in some of our masajid, the competent elders or attendees begin to attack people who are performing salah at this time. They should also take a few steps back and think before they do things. And it was in relation to the masjid that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Innama bu'ithtum muyassirin wa lam tub'athu mu'assirin." You have only been sent as people who make things easy. You have not been sent to make things hard, right? So if somebody makes a mistake in our masjid or in front of us, we should not be harshly telling them. We should be telling them calmly, explain to them nicely, right? The example that was given in this hadith was a very astonishing example, right? That the person who had come to the masjid, right, had done something that you cannot even imagine being done in the masjid. But because he was not from, like the city, and he did not understand the situation, so he began to relieve himself in the masjid, right? Obviously, the masjids were not carpeted like they are today, but he began to relieve himself, and the Sahaba were going to stop him, and the Prophet ﷺ said, just let him be. And then Rasulullah ﷺ called him over and explained to him calmly and nicely in the best of manners. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to the Sahaba, you have been sent as people who make easy, you have not been sent as people who make hard. So if somebody makes a mistake in front of us, we don't harshly tell them off, we don't make them run away from the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And alhamdulillah, the platform where we're discussing Al-Markaz al-Islami, alhamdulillah, in this, in such places we have seen that alhamdulillah, the young people are, and young and old, regardless of age, are welcomed in a way that if they do make a mistake, they are calmly guided in relation to that, rather than harshly pushed away. So if somebody is performing salah at the makruh time, we should not jump on them, we should not pounce upon them, right, and tell them to stop performing salah, right, but rather we should wait. And if it's the time of, for example, close to Maghrib, we should realize that it may well be that the person is performing the Salatul Asr of their day. Now, if somebody is traveling and they get late, they have nowhere else to perform salah but the masjid. And if we are going to have our sticks and buttons out for anybody who starts performing salah at that time, we will be doing wrong, we'll be doing an injustice. So although it's makruh to perform salah 20 minutes before sunset, but if it's the asr of the day, you have to perform it. It's fard for you to perform that salah. And so that's an important point about makruh times. And then I'm just going to mention the last two conditions, right? And we will conclude our discussion. The last two conditions are, so when we look at it systematically, you've purified yourself, you've made sure you're wearing clothes. So those are the first two conditions. Then we'll go according to the systematic understanding. You're looking at the time. Is it time for salah? If it is time for salah, you're facing the qibla. When you face the qibla, then you will make intention, right? And I often joke, and some of our younger ones, alhamdulillah, know the Punjabi niyat intention better than I do. Niyat kiti maine, bandagi Allah Ta'ala di, etc., etc., right? So the Punjabi traditional niyat that used to be taught by our elders, alhamdulillah, it has many beautiful words in there as well of sincerity to, we're performing the salah khas waste Allah Ta'ala de, right, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're reminding yourself that you're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the intention is not the name of the words that you say. The intention is what's in your heart. And that's why some of our young ones are regurgitating words that they don't even understand, right? But they have to be aware of what they're saying. It has to be and it's in the heart at the end of the day. So if you didn't say it on your tongue, your intention will still be done. But inshallah, I'll make some further elaborations in relation to intention next week, inshallah. And the sixth one is Takbir al-Tahrima. And the sixth one is actually classed as the first fard anyway. So that will, inshallah, be continued next week. So we'll just finish the discussion about niyyah next week, intention, and make sure that we know these conditions of Baha. I've tried to repeat these conditions a number of times to encourage you to learn these conditions of Baha. It's upsetting sometimes that we see advanced students even forgetting these things. These are not things to be forgotten. These are basics of Salah that we should always know. And the best way of learning is that we pass on them. Before we pass on, we have to make sure we've got it correctly ourselves, right? In case we are passing on information in an incorrect way. But once we have correctly understood something, the best way of keeping it in our hearts and minds is by passing it on. So by teaching our children, by reminding those around us. It might even be that you're telling your siblings, your brothers and sisters, your friends, reminding them of these things, instead of having a wasteful discussion about things that, have no point or meaning or any purpose in our life. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten our hearts with the true understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who establish salah in the best of manners. Ameen bijahi nabi al-kareem. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.